every morning at exactly 6:50 a.m. Vera Callahan pulled into the same spot at the far end of the Sunrise Diner parking lot. Not because it was close to the entrance, but because the walk gave her 7 extra seconds to compose herself before pushing through that door. She needed those 7 seconds. She had been doing this for 11 months. Long enough that the parking lot asphalt had gone from summer soft to wind cracked and back again. Long enough that the hostess, a college girl named something Vera kept forgetting, had stopped handing her a menu. Long enough that booth number 4, the one near the heating vent, was simply understood to be hers between 7 and 7:45 every weekday morning. She always ordered the same thing. 2 scrambled eggs, wheat toast, no butter. Orange juice she barely touched. Coffee she refilled twice. She brought her laptop and opened it every morning, and every morning she stared at the same spreadsheet for 45 minutes without changing a single cell. The numbers didn't change. The problem didn't change. She had $214 left in checking, a rent payment due in 9 days, and a 7-year-old son named Elliot, who had asked her last Tuesday whether Santa could bring them a new ceiling fan, because the one in their apartment made a sound like something was trapped inside it. She had laughed at that. The way you laugh when the other option is something much worse. Vera was 38 years old. She had a business degree from a state school in Ohio, 12 years of work history in logistics, and a divorce that had finalized 14 months ago in a courthouse that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in this diner, not in this town, not in this life. She had plans once, real ones, but plans, she had learned, were things you made before you understood what life was actually willing to do to you. The diner was mostly quiet in the mornings. A few contractors in Carhartt jackets. A retired couple who split a single order of pancakes and did the crossword together. A man who came in every Thursday with a dog-eared paperback and left exactly 40 minutes later. Nobody bothered anybody. That was what she liked about it. She didn't come here for the food. She came because her apartment, at 6:50 in the morning after Elliot had been dropped at school, was the most suffocating place she had ever been in her life. The silence there was the wrong kind of silence. Heavy and accusing, full of all the things she hadn't figured out yet. The diner's silence was different. It was the silence of other people existing nearby. It asked nothing of her. She could breathe here. For 11 months, nobody had said more than "Here's your coffee, and have a good one." And that was fine. That was exactly fine. The morning it changed was a Wednesday in late March, and it started with noise. A family came in just after 7. A mother moving with the particular exhausted efficiency of someone who had already been awake for 3 hours. A boy of maybe 9 or 10 with a backpack still on. And a little girl who couldn't have been older than 5, wearing rain boots that had small yellow frogs on them, and carrying a stuffed elephant by one ear. The girl was talking before she even cleared the door, something about whether elephants could swim, and the mother was saying, "I don't know, baby, let's sit down," and the boy was already asking about the specials board. And all of it was warm and loud and slightly chaotic, in the way that families are, the way that used to be normal to Vera, and now felt like watching something through glass. They sat 2 booths down. Vera looked back at her spreadsheet. The little girl, she noticed, had a way of swiveling in her seat to look at everything in the diner with the same bright, systematic interest. The pie case, the jukebox in the corner, the laminated signs near the register, and then eventually Vera. Vera didn't think much of it. Kids looked at things, that was their job. She went back to the numbers. But a few minutes later, she heard the little girl's voice drop into that loud whisper that children think is quiet. "Mama, why is that lady eating by herself?" There was a brief silence. The mother said softly, "Lots of people eat by themselves, Bug." But she looks sad. "Shh, does she not have any friends? Sweetheart, we could be her friends. Eat your eggs." Vera kept her eyes on the screen. She was very good at keeping her eyes on the screen. She had gotten good at a lot of things in the last 14 months that she never wanted to be good at. The family finished their breakfast. The boy ate fast and started reading something on his mother's phone. The little girl finished her toast and went back to examining the room. And at some point Vera stopped noticing them, because the spreadsheet had started doing that thing it sometimes did, where all the numbers blurred together, and she had to close her eyes for a moment and remind herself that she was still solving the problem. She was still working on it. She had not given up. She had not given up. When she opened her eyes, there was a folded piece of paper on the edge of her table. She hadn't heard anyone approach. She looked up, and the little girl was already trotting back to her booth, rain boots squeaking softly, on the linoleum, stuffed elephant swinging. The mother was watching with an expression that was equal parts apologetic and helpless. The look of a parent who had tried to stop something 3 seconds too late. Vera looked at the paper. It was a page torn from the small spiral notebook the boy had apparently been using. And it was folded in half with the careful deliberateness that children apply to things they consider important. Her name wasn't on it. The outside just had a small drawing of what might have been a sun, or possibly a flower, or possibly something else entirely. She should have just smiled and put it in her bag. That would have been the normal thing. She unfolded it. The handwriting was large and uneven, the letters bumping into each other in places, certain capitals showing up in the middle of words for reasons known only to the writer. You look lonely. Our mom says it's okay to be lonely sometimes, but she also says it always gets better. I think she is right. Vera read it twice, then she read it a third time. She was not a person who cried in public. She had not cried in the courthouse when the judge signed the papers. She had not cried in the parking lot of Elliot's school, when she'd had to tell him they were moving. That the house with the big yard was going to be someone else's house now, that they were going to have an apartment with a pool. She'd said that, with a pool. Like it was a selling point. And Elliot had nodded very seriously and said okay. She had not cried then. She was not going to cry in a diner over a note from a child she didn't know. She pressed her lips together and stared at the ceiling for a moment. At the water stain above booth 6 that looked vaguely like the state of Florida, and she breathed. When she looked back at the family's booth, the little girl, Polly, was watching her with enormous eyes, clearly uncertain now whether she had done something wonderful or something terrible. The boy had looked up from the phone. The mother caught Vera's eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Vera shook her head. She wasn't sure what she meant by it exactly. "Don't apologize. It's fine, I'm fine, she's fine, everything is fine." But she shook her head, and then, because there was nothing else to do, she picked up her coffee cup and her laptop and walked over to their booth. The mother straightened slightly. The boy tucked the phone away with the automatic guilt of a kid who knows the phone probably shouldn't have been out. Polly froze, then very slowly began to smile, starting at one corner of her mouth and spreading like she couldn't quite contain it. "I'm Vera," she said. She looked at Polly. "Did you write me a note?" Polly nodded, very seriously. "I wanted you to know about the getting better part. I read that part." "Do you believe it?" Vera opened her mouth, closed it. Looked at this child, 5 years old, rain boots with frogs on them still holding the elephant. Asking her with complete sincerity whether she believed things were going to get better. Polly seemed to find this acceptable. She scooted over in the booth to make room. The mother, her name was Adele, she said, and the boy was Tomas. He was 9, and currently furious about something at school that she was trying not to take personally. Said again that she was sorry, that Polly didn't have a filter yet, that they were working on it. "Working on the filter or working on the fact that she's right?" Vera asked. Adele laughed. A real one, surprised out of her. "Honestly? Both." They talked for 20 minutes. Not about anything heavy. Tomas asked about her laptop because he was interested in tech. And she told him she worked in supply chain logistics, and he said he didn't know what that was. And she said it mostly meant spreadsheets and problems, and he said that sounded hard. And she said sometimes it was, and sometimes it was just spreadsheets. Polly explained in great detail the argument she was currently having with herself about whether elephants were actually afraid of mice, which she had heard was a thing. But which she didn't believe because elephants were so much bigger. "Size doesn't always matter," Vera said. "Sometimes some small things scare us more than big ones." Polly thought about this for a long moment. "Like the dark?" "Like the dark." "I'm not scared of the dark anymore," Polly said, with the confidence of someone who has recently conquered something. "I decided not to be." Vera looked at her. "How?" "I just kept going in it until it was normal." The thing about children, Vera thought, was that they said things they didn't know were profound, because they didn't yet understand that most adults had forgotten how to think that simply. She kept going in it until it was normal. When Adele started gathering their things, Polly asked Vera if she would be at the diner tomorrow. "I'm here every morning," Vera said. "We're only here on Wednesdays," Polly said with the gravity of someone imparting important scheduling information. "But I'll wave if I see you. I'll watch for it." "From out there." Polly pointed at the window. "From out there," Vera agreed. After they left, she sat in her own booth again. The note was still in her hand. She smoothed it out flat on the table and looked at it. The bumping letters, the stray capitals, the drawing that might have been a sun. "It always gets better. I think she is." Right, the spreadsheet was still open on her laptop. The numbers were the same. $214. 9 days. One busted ceiling fan. One 7-year-old who had learned not to ask about the things that might upset her. Vera picked up her phone. She had been putting off a call for 3 weeks. A former colleague who had mentioned, in passing, that her company was looking for someone with logistics experience, that the pay was decent, that it might be worth a conversation. Vera had written down the number and then not called because not calling meant she didn't have to hear no, and as long as she didn't have to hear no, the possibility existed, and the possibility was sometimes the only thing that kept the spreadsheet from being just a list of numbers, and not a problem she was actively solving. She called. It rang 3 times. A woman answered. "This is Vera Callahan," she said. "I think we have a mutual contact. I was told you might have an opening." She had that conversation standing in the parking lot, in the cold, watching the cars move on the street outside. The woman on the phone asked her 3 questions, then told her to send a resume and expect a call within the week. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It was a door that had swung open a few inches, just enough to see that there was something on the other side. When she hung up, she stood there for a moment in the cold air. The next Wednesday, she saw Adele's car before she even pulled into the lot. A silver minivan with a dent in the back bumper, and a National Park sticker on the window. She recognized it. She hadn't realized she would. She was already at booth 4 when they came in. Polly was wearing different rain boots this time. Red ones, with white polka dots. And had apparently decided the elephant needed a scarf, which she had fashioned out of what looked like a dishcloth. Polly spotted her immediately and tugged Adele's sleeve and pointed. Vera waved. Polly waved back with her whole arm. They didn't sit in the same booth. The diner was busier that morning, and they ended up across the room, but every few minutes Polly would look over and Vera would look over at the same time, and they would exchange some small acknowledgement, a nod, a raised coffee cup, once a very solemn thumbs up from Polly, that Vera returned with equal solemnity. When they were leaving, Polly stopped at her table. "Did the getting better happen yet?" she asked. Vera thought about the phone call, about the resume she had finally updated the night before, at the kitchen table, while Elliot did his homework beside her and occasionally asked her how to spell things. About the ceiling fan, which she had looked up online and discovered she could probably replace herself for under $40. "It's starting to," she said. Polly nodded like this was exactly the correct answer. Then she set the stuffed elephant on the table. "This is Gerald," she said. "He can stay with you today if you want. He's good at making people feel better." Vera looked at the elephant. She looked at Polly. "Won't you miss him?" "He'll come back," Polly said simply. "He always does." She walked back to her mother, confident in the logic of lending your comfort object to a stranger, because children operate under a set of rules that adults have spent years complicating into something unrecognizable. Vera sat with Gerald for the rest of her coffee. She opened the spreadsheet and she looked at it. And for the first time in 11 months, the numbers looked like a problem with a solution instead of a wall with no door. She didn't know yet that the callback would come on a Friday, that the salary would be more than she expected, that by April she would have given notice on the apartment and found a rental house 3 blocks from a good elementary school, that Elliot would walk through the door the first time and immediately find the backyard and announce that this was the one. This was it. As if the entire last year had simply been the path to this particular backyard. She didn't know any of that yet. She just knew that a child with a dishcloth scarfed elephant had loaned her something small and essential, and that she had been sitting alone in this diner for 11 months, waiting for something to crack the silence open, and that she had assumed, when it happened, it would be something large. Something that announced itself. Something she would recognize as the moment things changed. She returned Gerald to Polly the following Wednesday. Folded inside a card she had written that morning at the kitchen table, while Elliot poured his cereal and told her about a book he was reading about deep-sea creatures, and said, without looking up, "Mom, did you know anglerfish have lights on their heads?" She had said she did know that. "I want to be a marine biologist," he said, with the full certainty of a 7-year-old who had been saying he wanted to be 6 different things in the past 4 months. "That's a good one," she said, and meant it. The card to Polly said, "Thank you for Gerald, he helped. I think you were right about the getting better, I'm starting to see it. Vera. P.S. Elephants are excellent swimmers. I looked it up." When Polly read it, Adele read it aloud to her while Tomas looked over her shoulder. She looked up at Vera with the specific satisfaction of someone who has said the right thing at exactly the right time and knows it. "See?" she said. "See," Vera agreed. She picked up her coffee. The spreadsheet was closed. She hadn't opened it in 2 weeks. Some problems, she had remembered, were not meant to be stared at until they surrendered. Some problems just needed you to take one call, make one decision, put one foot through the door. And then they stopped being the whole story and became just one part of it. She was not a woman who needed a child to save her. She had her own strength, her own history, her own stubborn refusal to stop solving the problem. But sometimes strength isn't what cracks you open. Sometimes it's just a small piece of paper with uneven handwriting, landing on the edge of your table on an ordinary Wednesday, reminding you that the people who see you most clearly are the ones who haven't yet learned to look away. That morning, for the first time in 11 months, Vera Callahan left the Sunrise Diner. Before her coffee was finished, she had somewhere to be.